Well, we're here in Villeneuve to talk to Alan Zoller, an old friend of mine and a great test pilot. We're going to show you how gliders are tested and what they go through before you buy them. We're going to show you reserve deployments and how important it is to get the main in and descend only under the reserve, and how to recognise and recover from a locked-in or neutral spiral dive, and a way of minimising the G in a spiral dive by holding in an asymmetric collapse on the outside of your rotation. Plus we're going to talk about water landings, harnesses,
See the potties rolling you all over?
twists and cravats. But first, let's get back to Alan Zoller and his team.
I'm full speed and I go crunch. Not the same. Okay, two different behavior. I have to re-begin.
Okay, Alan Zoller, I fly since quite long time ago. And my main job is to manage the certification in according of EN and LTF for the paraglider harness and the rescue.
Alan has arguably tested more paragliders than anyone else in the world. And if there are any quirks in the glider's handling, then he'll spot it. Each manoeuvre has to be performed twice with exactly the same result. If it isn't the same, then the test is done again and again until you get two exactly the same.
Okay, beeline stall test. Okay, and I go 2, 3, 4, and 5.
And then a category is awarded for that result.
Perfect.
Each EN flight test is filmed from the ground by his wife Randy Eriksson, so the manufacturers can see and review how he reached his conclusions. Alan is accompanied by fellow test pilot Claude Tourneur, who will also see demonstrating some test manoeuvres.
The category is if the wings exit of the spiral in 2 turns is okay, is A class. In 3 turns is C, action is D.
Like all the other European testing laboratories, Air Turquoise has a fantastic team of pilots that really work well together to ensure a consistent, objective test regime. But I think Air Turquoise's location really helps its success because of its high takeoff and short glides to the manoeuvring area above the calm Lake Leman. It's a perfect place to test. It's a lovely place to fly. It's really nice. A little bit tight, the landing, as you can see. I'm just coming in now. Just between the buildings and the poplar trees. And then I've got a few meters to run before flaring hard. Whoa, and landing perfectly, smoothly. Hey.
Yes, EN certification, it's some maneuvers. We have 24 maneuvers to give the possibility of the customer to compare the glider between. That means they can read the flight test report and they can understand why the glider is A, B, C or D about, for example, the asymmetric collapse, and they can see clearly the different behavior. For sure we work for security as well, because manufacturer, if we want to bring or if we bring the glider for the A classification or B classification and we found some maneuver doesn't correspond of that, the glider will be failed because the behavior will not correspond of the standard.
To cover all 24 manoeuvres usually requires about 3 separate test flights, and each must be flown in the same conditions, with the same pilot and the same weight. Here, chosen at random, is Flight 2 of a Niviuk Cougar to give you a taste of just another day at the office for Alain. Note the underside of his wing is marked with dotted lines made of black ripstop sticky tape. These are the intended crease marks for various collapses to help prove that the pilot has reached the exact deflation required for each test. You'll also see there's an added line. Pilot can pull that and achieve a neat crease following that exact fold line.
Okie dokie, second flight with the glider Niviuk Cougar 25, maximum weight 120 kilos. We are at Villeneuve, 20 of June 2011 for EN and LTF certification. The glider has 3 risers and I'm sitting in a Jingo 2 46 cm between carabiner. And the glider have a speed system. Okay, I will just go by the big ears. Okay, and top, I release, okay. I will do big ears full speed.
You may think this is a tame test, but big ears needs to be as stable as possible. Here's an example of what could go wrong, filmed on a recent SIV course in Australia.
Now the other side. Good.
Direction and weight shift must be maintained, especially with big ears, as you are effectively pulling 2 asymmetric tucks in succession.
Stop. Let go.
The unwary can stall or cascade, so care must be taken, especially as the manoeuvre is most likely to be used at cloud base.
Ease them off, and pump them out gently.
But Alan's test glider soaks it all up.
Okay, big ears and I go and top, I release. Okay, I will go for the front collapse full speed. Okay, I will go full speed, I am. Okay, and go. Crunch!
The longer and harder it is to recover the glider back to pilotable flight,
Okay, this is absolutely no problem.
the higher the letter.
I will repeat one more time.
Note that Alan makes time for the glider to level out and settle down before pushing the speed bar and initiating the next accelerated collapse.
Whoa, wait! I wait until the glider stabilizes and I go crunch. Okay, no problem. I will do the asymmetric collapse 75% full speed.
Before we see Alan test the asymmetric tuck, have a look at how my Australian students fared.
Good. Left brake, and roll it out gently.
The asymmetric collapse is the best indicator of the glider's general characteristics, as it incorporates both a sharp roll and turn, which can lead to an accelerating spiral, and a violent dive, which may result in a cascade or further collapses. It is therefore the mishap most likely to put pilots out of control and initiate a worsening chain of events, like a cascade.
Brake a bit. Okay, left brake, just gently left brake.
This is why test centres pay so much attention to establishing a consistent deflation test. Here is Claude testing a school glider's 75% asymmetric collapse.
I'll continue by the 70 to 75 now. Full speed, side collapse. Okay, and check.
75% is a lot of wing to lose, and every pilot needs the reassurance that it will recover to a pilotable flight.
Okay, perfect to the mark. Rotation less than 90 degrees. Prep for A-class.
In the workshop, Randy demonstrates how they measure the precise amount of wing that will be folded in the simulated collapse. The wing is then marked with the ripstop sticky tape so that the pilot can be sure and the ground cameras can prove the accuracy of every test. So we're doing the deflation lines, 70% and 75%, and then we'll mark with 50%.
Then after we have 5% tolerance. The other mark will go at 70% of the span. Then it's why we have these 2 lines, and we should be in between for the side collapse, 70 or 75 maximum. We can be less or more.
it's not the wingtip behind Claude that deflates, it's the whole of the left-hand side and more, up to the 75% mark, that when collapsed transfers all the pilot's weight from that side and makes the deflation much more extreme and violent. So it's in your interest to understand how your glider recovers and responds to deflations like that.
For the A category, the glider, if I take the 75% collapse with and without accelerator, the glider should not change the axis more as 90 degrees, and the dive forward should not exceed 45 degrees angle. That means this is for the A category.
Side collapse and check collapse. Perfect. No turn more than 90 degrees, but for A class.
If we want now to take the B category, we can accept the change of direction of more as 90 degrees until 180 degrees, and as well maximum 45 degrees dive forward.
So the dive forward is still 45 degrees, but the turn doubles to 180 degrees. The grading allows just one characteristic to change at a time. So C category keeps the B's rotation limit of 180 degrees, but doubles the permissible dive to 90 degrees. And the D category keeps the dive, but doubles the turn to 360 degrees. Here, I'm on a B glider with a 50% deflation, a 45 degree dive and 180 degree rotation. All seems benign enough, but watch out for other complications such as shock reinflation. This can happen and it takes you off guard. Although it seems quite violent, it doesn't actually change your course that much. But what you've got to be careful of is overreacting. Just quickly pull on the opposite brake and bring the glider rolling back onto a safe course.
As well, we can accept the opposite collapse, for example, for these both categories, C and D. But after, it's always depending about the dynamic of the glider.
I finish by the spin, develop spin. For this, I go 50% brake range. Okay, I am stable in fly, and after one turn, I move my hands up, and the wings should fly in less than 90 degrees.
The EN test doesn't just deflate gliders and see what happens with the pilot doing nothing. They also simulate pilot error. Here you can see Claude demonstrating EN test 15, which is a maintained asymmetric collapse. So he collapses the glider 50% and holds his course. Then it must be possible to turn 180 degrees away from the collapse within 10 seconds. If he can pull more than 50% brake range without the glider stalling or spinning, then it gets an A category. So here we can see that this is a forgiving low-end 1-2 or ENB glider. On the other hand, Alan's glider is expected to get a D for accelerated asymmetric collapse. Note the toggle and the blue line on his right side, which will be pulled to make sure he gets a perfect 75% crease.
I am full speed and I go.
With a 90 degree dive and more than 360 degree turn, this glider is D. But even then, Alan is looking for consistency.
I will do the same. Back of camera. Okay, full speed. I'm full speed and I go.
The second asymmetric collapses on the opposite tip.
Not the same. Okay, two different behavior. I have to re-begin.
This is different enough for Alan to need to check the
full
test
speed.
again.
I'm full speed and I go.
That's a great example of an outside tuck coming in but not altering the course. Therefore Alan is satisfied it merits a D.
For the C or D category, we can accept as well the opposite collapse, but we don't accept the cascade or twist or something like that. For example, dive forward and the bigger front collapse after the recovery of the normal flight. That means if the glider is reopen and shoot a lot and collapse again, this is a cascade. What we want to avoid is to fall in a cascade. The cascade is if the glider got a huge opposite collapse and get the big opposite rotation, or The opposite rotation and the full front collapse, for example. What is cascade, twist, this is failed. We cannot accept that of behavior.
But if it's starting to get ugly, you can always stall it out. A stall erases all problems, reboots the system, settles you down, and then you can gently release the stall and recover the flight.
I will stay on this axis now for the full stall.
Okay.
Okay, I release, okay, wait, perfect, and up, hands up. I will continue, side of camera, okay, and I go.
Note the blue and red streamers halfway up his lines, which stop flying and go vertical.
Up, hands up, okay.
Okay, we use a ribbon is to show we fly or not. And when we fly, the ribbon is horizontal, and if we lose the fly, like deep stall, the ribbon go higher, vertical, and like this we can see if the test is like I command.
So you can see from the streamers that on releasing the brakes, the glider stays in deep stall while it regains pressure before regaining airspeed and diving back into balanced flight. This means it's a safe glider in pitch. Pilots need to be well versed at where all their emergency lines are, like stabiliser lines and big ear lines. And manufacturers are doing their utmost to standardise this range by having different colours and having the lines on the same place. When the EN testing laboratory measure and mark the lines for testing, what they're doing is applying the brake until the trailing edge starts to come down. That's the start point.
Here, 4 point. This is the 0 point. This is the first action to the trailing edge. 0. Then after we have the stall point. From this first point to the last one, we should make the movement in 5 seconds. Then when we arrive to this point, the wings should lose the fly in less than 3 seconds. Otherwise this point is wrong. We should adjust this point. And from there's 2 mark, we have the 50% brake travel, then the other possibility is the 25 from the 50 and 75 from the other side. Then we have 3 spin. The spin will be from 50%, like develop spin. We will be 50% symmetrically. Then after we reverse the command to make 1 turn. Then when we release, the wing should fly again in less than 90 degrees to get A class. If it's more, it's C or D.
The difference between these test pilots and the rest of us is that they're not allowed to intervene in most of the tests, except in extreme circumstances. The aim of the test is often to discover the passive response of the glider, and the pilot must hold his nerve and become a passenger and observe the outcome. If the pilot does have to use the brakes during a test flight, then that's recorded and the glider gets a suitable result.
Do you ever get scared testing now?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, for sure. We sometimes have surprise, but it's our work, and progressively you feel the wings, then progressively you will get the right movement for the right maneuver, and progressively you will fly safe.
And how many reserves have you thrown during testing?
One in 17 years. Yeah.
And how many gliders have failed, gone into cascade, but you've recovered it and...
Maybe like 15, 20.
And I go for a steep spiral.
The gliders that are available today have been designed by passionate experts and have objectively and systematically been tested by the laboratories So it's in your interest to make sure you do the research. Testing is a great way of checking a glider's safety and suitability to the right pilot.
Good.
But do remember, it is just a guideline and should be just part of your decision-making process. Get a glider that suits your purpose, confidence and skill levels, and don't pigeonhole yourself and pass the decision-making process to the test results. Just to give you an idea, manufacturers make gliders to suit the pilot it's made for and the soaring conditions it's designed to fly in. They make a glider, fly it in thermals and soaring conditions, and fine-tune its handling and performance and safety. And when they've created what they believe to be the best glider for that type of person, then they submit it for testing. And whatever it gets, it gets. The designers and pilots know what they're doing, and they won't make a dangerous wing. And the testing laboratory won't let them either. But they don't let the tail wag the dog and bend their handling and characteristics to fit a test result. So it's down to you to read the manufacturer's write-ups, look at the test report, and make an informed decision.
And now I will do nothing. End of the second flight with Alain on this Cougar. Cougar 25 maximum weight, 120 kilos, 20 of June 2011 for EN and LTF certification.
Your choice of harness, the width of the chest strap, your flying position and weight distribution all have a major impact on the safety and handling of your glider. If wrong, any one of these factors can lift it a grade above the published results. If they're all non-standard, you have a very different glider from the one the manufacturers lovingly designed. For this reason, the test centres always use the same classic harness consistently and bring objectivity to all their data.
We have three settings for the harness during certification. For the very light pilot, the distance between risers is 38 cm, and after until 80 kilos is 42 cm, and over 80 kilos is 46 cm between risers. We investigate a lot about the harness setting, and what we discover, it's more tight is it, more the glider can stay in neutrality spiral, and more wide is it, you can have effect on the asymmetric collapse, or the glider can have a worse behavior in asymmetric collapse, for example.
With an asymmetric tuck, if you widen the harness just 5 centimeters and do the same deflation, a Category A glider can turn into Category B glider because of the violent turn and the rate at which it descends, and the leading edge dives because of the huge amount of weight shift being tipped into the maneuver. This becomes more pronounced on a performance glider. As a medium-sized kind of bloke, I fly with chest strap at about 42 centimeters. But here's what happens when you go rogue. If I go very wide, way more than 42, I'll change the characteristics, make me weight shift into a deflation, roll faster and harder. Now, I will demonstrate that, so I'm going to just keep it separate. I'm going to do an asymmetric collapse, and we know that this glider goes around and pretty much comes out after 360, but I'm going to deflate it, lean in, and you'll see how much faster it is. Okay, so deflation in, okay, I'm leaning in, and it's going around, it's continuing round, and eventually it's coming out. So that came out after sort of 2 rotations, because all my weight has fallen into that. It's making it more aggressive, the turn, it's keeping me in. Whereas if I have it at 42, okay, I'll go again. So that's about right, 42. I'll do the same deflation, lean in, and you'll see the difference. Ready? So deflation, I'm leaning in, okay, I'm going round, and it's pulling out at 180 degrees, okay? And so that shows a big difference. So the difference in your harness shows the different characteristics. It's good to have it wide because you feel it more and you're more responsive, but if you have a problem, obviously,
you've got to make sure you weight shift away from the problem and deal with it. You just have to know what your limits are. But the general rule is 42 centimeters. That's comfortable. That's what it's generally tested at. If you're a bigger person with a bigger harness, that goes bigger. If you're smaller, that goes smaller. But generally 42. And you can see the difference. It's amazing that it makes it go up a level.
Harnesses are very personal, and it's important that you get what's comfortable for you and feels right. But what feels like a little niggle half an hour into a flight will probably be a very uncomfortable cause for you landing after about 3 hours. So make sure if you've got something that is not quite right, sort it out before you do a long flight.
In testing, we should take care about the position of the pilot in a harness, because if you are a little bit more straight, or if you lay a little bit, you can change the behavior of the glider.
If you're too supine and you have problems, you yaw around the place all the time, and that causing twists in your risers.
If you have the straight body like this, or even not extreme like a pod, but just little laying, more laying, you will change the behavior of the glider. For example, when you have in a pod harness, you have more twist tendency, because we cannot stabilize with the plate in a harness by your balance.
Here are our Australian buddies doing SIV in race harnesses. Flying fast in a pod harness is easy to get twisted, even doing basic manoeuvres. The inertia of the pilot's body spread out horizontally makes it much slower to catch up if the glider's turning suddenly.
Again, big ears, go, but try not to roll into the turn.
And when the glider stops, the body mass keeps going unless the pilot shows great skill and stops it. I myself fly with a race harness and I love it. You feel great and very secure, warmly wrapped and gliding efficiently, but you do lose that sort of sixth sense of the wind in your leg hairs. So be careful. They're fantastic harnesses, but they do have their vices, and it's important that you fly within their flying envelope and sit up and control the wing if you do have a collapse, spin or stall. Flying with a stirrup harness is very similar to flying with a pod harness, in that your feet are out front and you have your instability. So if you do have a deflation, you've got to come off the stirrup and sit up and weight shift away from it and control the glider. I asked Alan what he thought of pod harnesses.
We don't have so much experience with that for certification, because we don't use that for certification, and we take the normal position. But we can see, and for sure we test different harnesses as well in different positions. It's not really objective.
During a stall, it's made much worse if the pilot's body is being thrown around. So it's important to make sure the pilot is sitting up and in control of the wing and able to follow it and steer it through all the maneuvers.
More wide is it, the stall will be more uncomfortable for the pilot, because he will lose the balance, or he will lose the weight shift in the harness. That means suddenly he can fall in a side, and he can disturb the geometry of the full stall.
You can see here, I've got about 42 centimeters separation, but even that, you can see the difference in height between the melons as I rock from side to side. Imagine that if it was really loose. It really does aggravate the stall and accelerate the problem. Here's a pilot searching for stall with a wide harness setting. As the glider goes negative, it gets rolled from one side to the other. And the risers are pulled together and twist up. You can see here, one melon is way below the other, locks into the twist, and the two risers are effectively one, which only allows the canopy to twist up even more. Which leads us neatly on to the next subject, twists.
Okay, are you ready, Martin?
What are we doing?
We're doing twists. Are you ready, old girl?
I am.
Okay, twists. Okay, so imagine if you did a massive maneuver and you released asymmetrically from a stall and you got a twist. It can happen, so you need to know sort of what to do with it. I'll give you a quick demonstration. You can have, you always would have your hands in your brakes, okay? But I've got to just get around in a twist. So I'm going to twist once and just have to break away. Woo! Okay.
Come on, jockey, get it right. With any glider, if you've been turned less than 180 degrees, the separating forces will always return you back to balanced flight.
Right, so I'm going to do a twist. I'll just show you how to recover from it. So I'm going to go round once, that's it, and then I'll go round again. Now if you get a twist like that, what you do is you block it at the top. You hold the top of the risers to stop the twist anymore. See, my arms now have become the risers, so I can't twist anymore. If I was to let go of that, there's only one point of access, and I'll rotate on that, and it'll get worse and worse. So if ever you see a twist, block it straight away. If you want to steer, you can steer using the back risers or the brakes above the twist. Okay, so there's no panic, don't panic. And then to kick it out, look at the way the twist is going, and then do healthy scissor kicks to get it out. And then it pops out.
With high aspect ratio wings, it can be a bit more difficult to start a twist, but the principle is the same, and they're more dynamic, so you do need to be quicker to respond.
Normally, what happens is you've got your brakes in your hands, it's all going wrong, the glider dives, it collapses, it rotates, and it twists. And then you've got your hands in the brakes, but they're twisted within the system. That locks it on. And if it locks your brakes on, the friction will keep the brakes at exactly where you left them, where your hands were. So if it's in a stall, it'll stay in that position. It'll slowly creep out and the stall will get more and more benign, but it'll pretty much be locked on. The friction of the risers twisting around each other keeps the brakes on, so it keeps it in a sort of hovering deep stall. That can save you sometimes.
If it's locked in a stall with a twist, providing it's stable and you have the height, just kick out the twists, and as the friction gets less, the glider smoothly dives and does a perfect stall exit.
But if it's locked in, then and your brakes are locked on, then you've got to go above the twist if you can, and you've got to use the back risers or the brakes to steer and slow you down. Whatever you do, keep your hands in the brakes, because when you kick out the twists again, then you've got them in your hands. So you go from there up to the back risers and you steer. So I can do steering here with back risers, doing wing overs. I've got good control with back risers, and it's good to get used to that. And then once you stabilize the wing, okay, I'll stabilize the wing, then you kick out the twist. So there are many techniques as long as you stop the twist. If the twist carries on, whoom, 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 and your brakes are completely locked, they can't do anything, and you can't get past the twist, and it's accelerating into a 360 spiral, then it's reserve time.
Here's our crash test dummy Johan, low over the water, getting a fast and big twist. He looks at his options and throws his reserve quickly, which was the right decision, because with that many twists and that violent a turn, it would have taken a long time to get it out, if he could at all. But not all twists end in reserve deployments. Here we can see Johan with more height and more decision time. He's demonstrating a helicopter which he has to stall out. So he stalls it and it dives, doesn't quite break the dive, and he now stalls it again. But then he gets a twist. So during the twist you can see it's slightly cravatted, it's going backwards, but his hand reaches up above the twist and he pulls it out, which is great, but unfortunately the momentum keeps him going round and he retwists again. Now look at this twist, there's two twists in this time, and he's using the force of his hands to rotate it back and get it into line. You can see his brake handles coming down, but as soon as it dives, it collapses again, cravats, and twists the other way. But he keeps his cool, holds onto his brakes, restalls it, settles it down, and flies away. With a tiny little cravat in the side, which he pops out with a stabilizer line, and then he flies to the beach, chewing a little bit faster than he did before. That looked horrendous, but the self-belief, correct technique and timing really saved the day. A cravat is probably the last thing you want to see while you're paragliding. They're generally caused by a violent dive forwards and sideways, folding the wingtip into the centre and getting caught in the tip lines. Or also by a messy stall release, where the glider's released whilst the wingtips are still in front. I'm going to show you a full stall with a sport glider, which is high aspect ratio, a little bit racier, and there's a higher chance of it cravating. And that's what I want to do. I want to get it into a cravat so that I can show you how to get out of it. So we'll just stall it. Okay, back I go. I'll now ease it off now. That's good, I've got a small cravat. So it's turning me left, which is great. So all I do is weight shift right, like that, pull the stabilizer line, and it should come out, or pump it, and it comes out straight away. No problems there really. That was a small cravat, not a very big one. Still quite fun. So the process is you gain your course. It can be a sort of turning course, as long as you've got load on the wing and it's positive. And then you can pump on the brakes or go for the stabilizer line, okay, and pop it out. And if that doesn't work, then do an asymmetric tuck on the cravated side. That normally relieves the pressure and allows you to pump the cravat out.
And if that doesn't work, obviously you stall it out. But it's good, once you're in a 360 smooth, you've got the opposite brake on, you're controlling it. You can actually, whilst you've got the pressure on, pull the stabilizer line as well. And because you've got the pressure, it tugs it out and it comes straight out. I've still got a cravat there, look. I've still got a cravat on my right, I didn't look at it. So let's see, I'm going to do a stabilizer tug, which is pulling on the loose lines. And it should come out, no, nearly. And it's straight out. Okay, so we pull the stabilizer line and it pulled straight out. That's what you do. See, the glider is so beautifully calm, I didn't even know. Shocking, shocking flying. Anyway.
So you can see how a minor cravat needn't disturb your flight. Don't get fixated on it if the glider is flying okay, and don't turn a minor mishap into a crisis. Here's Aussie Greg keeping his Gallipoli nerve when a cravat sets in during a tow takeoff.
Okay, you got a cravat left side, tie over.
He stays on tow and lets the glider fly while assessing any course correction that's needed.
Just keep flying, we'll get it out when you get up there, if you're happy with that. Okay, release, release, release. Brake, brake, brake. Okay, left brake, left brake. Just enough to hold your course, don't overreact because you've got a cravat. Okay, left brake, left weight shift, pull on the outside.
Despite resisting all attempts to get rid of it, it's relatively benign.
It's good, lovely control.
But you can see that even a small one can be tenacious, so you have to be quick at assessing the correct action to take.
You're going to land now. No wing overs because that cravat will really roll you in.
But make sure you always turn to the cravated side, monitoring it with the outside brake as you turn. Because if you turn too hard away from the cravated side, it could stall or spin, especially if you're going through wind gradient. So let's go back to Turkey and create a more challenging cravat.
So we'll fly along. Ready? Bury the brake. Okay, round I go. Okay, it's going round. Not nice, so I stall it. Good. Now I smoothly release. Oops, it is cravated. Okay. Okay, that's great. Good, I've got a cravat. That's lovely. So let's see it. So here's the cravat. I'm going for the stabilizer line, which is the B. Give it a little tug. And it's not quite coming out there. Let's go for the stabilizer line properly. There you go, it's coming out. Nearly. Go for the loose line. Give it a pump maybe. Oh no. Okay, here we go. Here's the loose line. There you go. Stabilizer pull. Here it comes. Hey, it's out. You see? That's how to get it out. You keep your course. Don't panic, obviously. And settle yourself down. Then look at the problem, okay? Always look, right, I've got a cravat, I've got to deal with that, but am I high enough to deal with that? Yes? Okay, back to the problem. And so you start pulling the stabilizer line, give it a good tug, or any loose line. If you don't know where it is, just pull any loose line and it should come out. Or a little sort of tug, pump on the brakes. Or you can sort of big gear as well to give you symmetry. If you feel as though the cravat's turning you a lot, then pulling both big gears on can often make you symmetric and then help you get the cravat out. There's lots of techniques, but stabilizer on's normally quite good. Another one you can do is, if it's cravated and you're in a banking turn, then whilst you've still got the pressure on, then stabilizer pull, and that pops it out because you've got more air rammed into it. So that's a good one too.
So that was a medium hard cravat. Now look at an even bigger cravat. This would really pull you into a locked in cravatted spiral if not corrected quickly.
So pull on my brakes, of course, and correct. I pump. It's almost out. I've got a lot of weight shift. Okay, it's still in. There you go. Really out. Taking a wrap on the left brake now. I've got more of the cravat out. Okay. Okay, so that's in. Cravat is in. So I'm going to stall it again. Just fall back gently. Now it's out, so I now ease off, let it come out, and recover. So there you go. You keep the opposite weight shift, opposite brake, and then you try and pump out the cravat. If it doesn't come out with a pump, then it's quite big, because it's so big that there's not much brake being pulled. So you can take a wrap, like I did, and it comes out a little bit and it becomes more manageable. But the important thing is keep the pressure on, keep a turn on, that's fine. Don't stall this side. Then if you think, well, I can't get it out by pumping, it's too big to get it out by pulling the stabilizer line, so just stall it. It flies backwards a little bit. You can see the cravat coming out easily, and then you ease off the brakes and fly away. So that's a nicer way. And you can see that with higher end gliders, that's the best way to get it out. You don't need to fully stall it, you just need to fly it backwards, clear the cravat, ease off the brakes and fly away.
Always be quick to nip a cravat in the bud, because they can come in with very violent dynamic forces, and it's vital that you match your recovery to suit that force and get the glider back to pilotable flight as soon as possible. Because of the high G manoeuvres, we've had to use different filming and sound equipment, so please bear with us on the sound quality. As we've shown you already, the spiral dive is the quickest rapid descent technique in a pilot's arsenal. Descent rates of up to 20 meters per second can be achieved, and it offers the best chance of escaping a sucking cloud and enables you to get down really fast and in a controlled way. But it is a high G manoeuvre, which does affect the life of the lines and is at the limit of some pilots' physiques. The high Gs can cause pilots to either black out, and also it limits the movement of their muscles. So the testing laboratories need to establish the glider's tendency to ratchet up the G, and should the pilot pass out of the controls, will it exit of its own accord or stay locked in all the way to the ground? You should be reassured to know that the gliders flown so far in this film are not prone to lock in. So in order to demonstrate, I've had to come to Villeneuve to borrow Alan Zoller's customised wing, which when ballasted up will reliably lock in.
Okay, so I have Alan Zoller's personal glider. He's changed all of the trim and everything, so it's a non-certified glider. It's very nice, but it does lock into a spiral, okay? I put an added weight on, which is the ballast here, and that's 13 kilos. So my flying weight is 105 kilograms, all right? Feel like a fat man with his stomach trying to get to his penis. So I'm 105 kilograms, flying at a standard setting, okay? And we're going to show you the glider locking in, and then I'll show you it staying in, neutral, and then how to exit it, okay? I'm just going to take a wrap. I'm going to enter the spiral and see if I get it to lock in. So here we go, applying the brakes. Very top right number is the descent rate, and you can see the brakes are up. It's locked in, and it's not coming out. And now I apply the opposite brake, and gently, or I'll loop it, and here it comes out. Very nice. Easy. Gently brake the surge, and it pulls straight out. So that is the glider locking in. You can see maybe from my hands that it was okay. But when it locks in, all you do is just gently apply on the outside brake, and it'll come straight out. It might be physical, but it'll come straight out, okay? And that's the key. Just apply outside brake and it'll come out very smoothly. Or you can apply gently both brakes and slow it down, and it'll also come out. And that's a symmetric way, so you don't get confused. But in reality, when you're coming out of a spiral dive, you gently ease off the brake and gently weight shift the other way, just smoothly, so that you turn the spiral into a tight 360.
Here we can see Claude testing a beginner glider for its exit from a spiral. The moment he takes his hands off the brakes, the glider bobs back out into level flight within 1 360, earning it an A. In the past, gliders were checked at 14 meters a second to see whether they locked in or were stable on exit. This ignored the fact that they might not lock in until 16 or 17 meters a second. So now, the test is to drop into a spiral dive, whatever the descent rate, record it and see how well it comes out, and give it a category based on these characteristics.
We will test the spiral and maximum of descent as the glider can take, and the pilot will release slowly in one turn. It's more realistic to do like that, and the behavior will be, the classification will be in according to the behavior of the exit of the glider. That means until 2 turns it will be between A and B, and action of pilot C and D. It's more realistic, and we don't use the instrument for that.
So we're going to do another spiral. So I take a wrap, I turn into the turn, I get it to lock in. Now. So look, no hands, but see the outside brake, how little I move, and police it with inside and to level flight. Straight out, no problems at all. Climbs out, flies forwards, and flies away. Very nice, very smooth. So don't be disconcerted. If it stays in a spiral and it's locked in, don't worry. Just pull on the outside brake, it'll pull straight out, and you'll be all right, okay? And if you did it correctly and sort of eased off the initiating side and gently weight shifted away, it'll always come out anyway. So there's nothing to worry with a spiral. Even a spiral that locks in, just pull on the outside brake. And if that doesn't work, pull on the outside brake harder. And if that doesn't work, squeeze on both brakes and slow it down, and then pull it out. So they're the recovery techniques for a spiral dive. So it's not a problem, as long as you're aware that your glider does it, and therefore you must gently weight shift away and gently pull on the outside brake, enough to recover the glider.
Be careful not to weight shift too violently out of the spiral, or you may end up looping it. You will also find that less weight shift on entry into a spiral can reduce the likelihood of it getting locked in.
Okay, I'm going to land now. Look how lovely real now. It's gorgeous. Woo! I love this place. It's amazing.
There are some great mini drogue chutes that reduce the G as you spiral, but you can do this yourself by doing an outside tuck and holding it in.
So a good recommendation that Alan Zoller gave for doing a spiral dive that reduces the amount of G is to do an asymmetric collapse but spiral the other way. So you collapse the wing, so I'll collapse the wing on my left, but I'll spiral to the right. Okay, that will lock me into a spiral, but it will reduce the amount of G on my body, which is good, so it minimises blacking out or anything like that. We're doing it on the Delta, which should be okay. It might snap out. Okay, so I'm going to take the outside 2A line and collapse it and hold it in. Okay, so
Collapse it, so then spiral the other way. The G is less, it's slightly less descent rate than a spiral, but it's a lot more comfortable.
and then what I'll do is I'll pull out, so I just ease it out gently, and I fly away. So what's happening is it goes into a spiral, it's nice and locked in, but it's not bad, you know, it's quite safe, minimal G, and you don't have that blackout problem. So that's a really good way of doing it. So I'll show you again. I'll do an asymmetric collapse. Okay, good. And then I'll just stabilize it and gently turn to the right and lock into a spiral. And then I'll pull out. And it recovers. Really nice, very smooth, and less G. So that's another way of getting down without worrying about blacking out too much.
Just so you can see how effective this technique is, we made a comparison in Annecy. Okay, yeah, go.
Okay, go.
With Tim collapsing his glider on the right and Chris doing a traditional spiral on the left. Tim experiences far less G, but the sync rate is almost as good. His wing is just as pressured, and he has to bleed off less momentum. So if you don't enjoy maximum high G manoeuvres, or you're prone to blacking out, then I'd suggest Tim's technique is the one for you. Personally, I don't use spirals much, as tight 3/6s will do the job just as well without exposing yourself to the risk of it locking in and putting excess strain on yourself and your glider. Tight 360s bring you down at about 14 meters a second, and that's often more than enough to lose the height and get away from the danger. When it all goes wrong and your wing is unrecoverable, or you're just running out of height, then throw your reserve.
Throw your reserve. Throw your reserve.
Having said that, there are a lot of things you need to know to ensure you walk away unharmed. This red handle is your best friend. I often give mine a reassuring pat before I take off. You must pull the reserve out of the harness the way it was put in. If you pull it 180 degrees across your lap, then it can get trapped, and handles have been ripped off because of the force of a panicking pilot.
Look, locate, grasp, pull and throw. And when you're throwing a reserve, you must make sure you pull the handle out the way you put the bag in. That's the critical piece. It comes out the way it slides in, and then you give it a healthy throw behind you, away from you. And then the reserve will open, whoomp, nice reassuring pull of angels. The main will dive forwards, reacting against that. You pull that in, you get everything you can in, and you descend only under your reserve.
Many pilots describe the opening of the reserve as delayed and rather gradual, but you only have a few seconds to depower your paraglider before it takes on a life of its own and starts to fly against the reserve and fast towards the ground. So the key thing is get the main in quick and use that dive to your advantage, so that as it dives forwards and goes slightly below you, then pull on the front A's and do a massive symmetric tuck. Then as the glider flies up past you, not inflated, you just grab all the loose lines and pull everything until you have the glider almost in your hands and non-reactive against the reserve. Once you've got the main under control and not flying, then it's time to get yourself sat up and get into the parachute landing position. And if you're landing in water, then just before you touch down, it's a good idea to just release the main so that it doesn't engulf you as you go in. The wind is dragging me and it's only a light breeze. A stronger wind would pull me right under. Here's a good example of a pilot ditching in the water in stronger winds. You can see the reserve staying open and starting to pull him. If that was any stronger, he would actually be pulled slightly under the surface of the water, and it'd be very hard for him to pull against the bridle and get the reserve down. And what it does is it keeps the pilot just under the surface of the water. You can't reach anything, the bridle, anything. It's pulling you along, drowning you. So you must make sure if you do any reserve deployment, you've got a rescue boat and it's not windy. If you are being dragged or dunked underwater, you can depower it by pulling the lowest line first, the ones closest to the surface of the water. Keep pulling them in, arm over arm, and progressively that snuffs the life out of the chute. So to recap, the parachute only opens properly when it's fully extended, so give it a big hard throw. The time invested in throwing it out is time saved in the actual opening speed of the parachute. Pull the A's in and do a big symmetric tuck as the glider dives forwards, and if they're too strong, then pull the C's, or failing that, pull both the brakes together. Have a look at some more reserve throws from our plucky Aussie friends again.
He's in the drink.
This is a good example of a pilot pulling in the A's instantly before it can start to downplane. And this is what a downplane can do, completely overpowering the reserve at a shocking speed. On land, this would result in a serious injury.
That's a big hit.
And here's a reserve test that Alan did. With no attempt to bring in the main canopy, it downplanes immediately, and the two opposing forces struggle against each other, and the descent rate is even faster. The instruments on that flight recorded over 14 meters a second descent rate. It's absolutely vital you get the main in. That's the game. Don't think, oh, I've got the paraglider and the parachute together, they're working like Apollo 13, because it won't. What will happen is three things. Either the main will downplane and fly against the parachute and make it fly at the ground much faster, twice the descent rate, like that, boof, not good. The other option is it starts to fly sideways, whoomph, and rotating, like that. That's normally when you've got a few twists and a cravat, and it rotates like that with you in the middle. That's not good either. And the other one is it bashes into it and starts stopping the reserve from working, and then you've got two useless gliders dropping you down. So the most important thing to do is get the main in, whatever means, whether it's diving, pulling a front collapse and pulling anything you can, whether it's C's or B's or brakes, but whatever you do, get the main in and descend just under the reserve parachute. With high velocity turns, the reserve deploys quickly, but with slow negative spins, it can limply hang around and drift up into the paraglider's lines. If you are locked into a slow rotation, then research has shown a good place to throw your reserve is towards your feet. This makes sure that the parachute is thrown to the outside of the rotation. Once established in a nosedive, the A's may be too hard to pull, so go for the C's, pulling them both hard in, and then hand one side to one hand, slide your hand up and pull in more, slide your hand up and pull in more, and eventually get the main down, which will help stabilise and minimise your descent rate. If you're going to pull the brakes, then treat it like a stall and really haul the glider clear of the reserve. A little brake or feeble beelining will only worsen the downplane as it feeds it with more lift. While you're hauling in the main, make sure you keep an eye out for the ground and always be ready to do a parachute landing roll. If you do find yourself low and in a spin or deep stall, then you can consider holding that on and piloting it to the ground, as a deep stall has a similar descent rate to a reserve, but without the added complication of the glider shooting and diving during a deployment. Reserve deployments are great. I've thrown 3 in anger and umpteen testing and playing around with them, but the reserve will look after you a whole lot better if it's properly fitted. In my experience, about 10% of reserves checked at repacks show potential for a malfunction. For example, like something as simple as a bridle attachment.
This is my parachute, the yellow gin, and so it comes from the bridle. It's attached from the parachute to the harness with a proper bridle, and it's attached with a proper 7mm malon, which is thick and will easily take the load, but it's quite narrow and minimises the movement of the malon sideways. Okay, so that's a good way of having it. Alright, I'll show you a bad example. Over here. Come on, Martin, come on! We must see it for the safety of the public! Okay, and here is a sort of same malon, okay, but if you have it loose, what happens is it can move, and whilst it's in your harness, and it can go like that and make the tension and the weak point here, okay, which isn't perfect. Okay, it's still better than being attached nylon to nylon, but it's better if you can minimize movement and have either an O malon or something to keep it straight, and make sure that you stop any movement there. Okay,
Use this one.
Randy's repacked thousands of reserves, and this is how she attaches the O-ring.
Put in the O-ring like this and make a half twist. I put the bridle inside the O-ring and into the maillon, and after I closing the other side of the maillon. So the O-rings are for to avoid sliding of the bridles, so it stays better on the maillons. This is one of the better solution we have. It's important not to over tighten the maillon. So what we do is to screw it with the finger until it stops, and then take a quarter turn to tighten.
But another bad thing people do is this is even worse, is they attach nylon to nylon. They put this lark's footed through this one. Okay, so nylon to nylon, when you take a massive shock opening, a massive cravat, whizzing down, spiraling, out goes your reserve, but laugh, the parachute opens, bath. It's nylon to nylon, massive friction, that burns, away goes the reserve, and down you go. So you've got to have this metal. Okay, that's important, but get the metal right and make sure there's minimal movement between the two.
Where the reserve is attached is just as important. The pilot should ideally be attached at the highest suspension point on the shoulders on specially manufactured harness reserve loops, ensuring the pilot remains vertical and in the best position to do a parachute landing roll. If you mount the reserve on the normal carabiners, then you run the risk of being forced in a sitting position, which isn't great for a hard and fast landing. In contrast, tandem reserves should be mounted on the central flying attachment, which would bring down both the pilot and passenger at the same level as each other, giving both parties the best chance possible. Here, Chris and John selflessly demonstrate what would happen if you threw a tandem reserve with it mounted on the tandem pilot's harness. You can see the clear throw and steady deployment at normal flying speed. Having quickly released the main, they immediately are suspended on top of each other. Look at the position of poor John, the passenger, in relation to Chris. His head is level with Chris's manhood, and as well as being awkwardly intimate, it is incredibly dangerous for both parties. Here, in relatively benign conditions, the descent rate is at least 5 meters a second. But can you imagine coming down in this position in strong thermic wind and over land? In that hanging position, both pilot and especially the passenger would sustain life-threatening injuries. Fortunately for Chris, he's already spawned his 3 lovely sons and doesn't need functioning crown jewels. But I wouldn't like to land on the ground at that speed with anyone on top of me. Even during this demonstration, our brave passenger John hurt his back and shoulders despite the smiles. It is vital you think the whole process through and visualise the pull, angle and forces when the reserve opens and eventually deploys. Where will you hang on your descent, and will you be safe? So now we're happy with the attachments, our final demonstration is to compare the 2 additional techniques for neutralising the wing while under your reserve. So I'm going to demonstrate the C riser technique of pulling in your main if the A risers are already too resistant. And Chris is going to demonstrate the hauling in of the brakes technique. So, firm throw, and the reserve only has to have filled behind me, and I'm already hauling in the C risers. Now the canopy is neutralised, and I can easily pull in the C risers to stop it bashing into the reserve and descend smoothly under both canopies. Because with the C risers safely in, it acts like a parachute. Compared to this, the B lines are much higher maintenance because they require a bit more force to pull in, and then you are stuck restraining them all the way down. If you weaken and let go, the glider reverts straight into downplane mode. On the other hand, here comes Chris. As his reserve inflates, he pulls down on the brakes, which do leave the glider fully extended at the same height as the reserve. So he has a bit more work to do to get it down and out of the way of a parachute, but it's perfectly manageable. Once fully pulled down, you can see that Chris's wing is flapping around like a flag, offering very little resistance to the air, whereas my C line, with its bigger surface area to the airflow, enables me to have a gentler descent rate. You see, my hair doesn't even get wet on splashdown, whereas Chris's does, if he had any. If in doubt, throw it out. There is no minimum altitude to try it, because descending under a reserve is always preferable to a runaway wing. Plus, a reserve ride is a great thing to do, and you become a member of a very exclusive club. That was fantastic. So you can see the 2 differences between the 2 reserve deployments. Mine, I pulled the C risers. It was a nice, easy reserve, the 1G, and it was quite stable and easy. It was a nice, smooth, slow descent rate. And then Chris went for brake lines, and he pulled them in, twisted, pulled them in more, twisted more, and you could see it coming in and having very little effect on the parachute, coming down vertically. It was thrashing around, and it does keep the pilot occupied quite a lot because he's got his hands moving all the time. But you can see they're both good ways of stopping the glider from bashing into the parachute, and also the worst, downplaning.
Some people think that they can just come over water and just do maneuvers and they'll be safe. The problem with water is it's hard if you hit it really hard, like in a spiral dive or something, so you've got to be very careful of that. It's always best to pull out of a spiral or a cravat, just enter in a stall or anything, but not a spiral, otherwise you smack into it and it's just like concrete. Also, you have big waves sometimes. If you've got big waves and you get caught in that with your paraglider, you instantly get wrapped up in it. People can't get to you because it shelves off. The glider wraps around you and just wraps you up. You can't move your arms or anything. You're trapped very, very quickly. In just 2 breaks of the wave, you're caught. And that's it. You're in serious trouble. So don't land anywhere near waves. But don't think, oh, I'll just fly close to the waves and the beach and I'll just land. If you think you're going to go near any waves, fly away and land in unbroken water. There are some scenarios where people say they would unclip from their harness and jump into the water, therefore being away from all the kit. If it's good open water and you're safe, I would say stay in your harness, because from high up you think you're only 10 meters above the water when in fact you're 50. So don't do anything like that.
Look at this lovely smooth lake that Johan's flying over. How high do you think he is? 5 meters? 10 meters? Would you jump from this height? Now look at how small that rescue boat is. We're at least 20 meters up, and a jump from that height at that speed could be painful. So it's incredibly hard to gauge your height over smooth open water, and a strapped in landing would be safer as long as you can take into account the wind direction. Land downwind. People think they have to land into wind. Land downwind, because what happens is you come in and you flare hard, and as your feet touch the water you ease off the brakes and let the glider dive, keeping the lines tight and the leading edge hitting the surface of the water slowly, boof, like that. And that traps all the air in it like a lilo. All the lines are tight and away from you. If you turn into wind and land, it flutters down on you and you get trapped in all the lines. So the top tip, land anywhere downwind 180 degrees and you'll be fine. In nil winds, just encourage the glider to overfly you by releasing the brakes and not flaring so hard. If you're going to land in fast flowing water, a river for example, then you can gauge your altitude more easily, and also because of the flow of the river, the priority is slightly different. You want to unclip from your harness and unclip from the paraglider, because that's going to drag you downstream very badly. In which case, yeah, unclip, stay on your harness, and the minute you touch in, let your hands up and let it go. The same applies to strong wind as well as fast water. Here's that rascal Johan again, busting his acro moves, but what is he doing wrong? There's a lovely sat, perfect brake pressures and immaculate timing with good balance. Then the loop, perfect, and then through the other way with total precision, pressured all the way round. But there's something he's doing wrong. You may be able to see the white horses and big waves below. So Johan was busy shaking his stuff whilst a big strong sea breeze was coming in. It may be smooth up here, but down there it's all chopped up and you wouldn't want to ditch in that. An hour ago it was a blue sky day, but now it's mackereled over. This is an indicator of moist air condensing in its shear layer when it funnels inland. Chris and I were actually on the hills behind at the same time as this, instructing our group to land because of the strengthening wind and the fast developing cumulus clouds popping off across the valley. Fortunately, Johan had organised a safety boat, but with hindsight, it's probably best to not even start doing acro if the sea is looking that bad and there's a suspicion of strong winds. But be aware that should you have to throw your reserve, unclipping from your harness before splashdown is not usually an option, whatever the conditions. This is because under the reserve you're normally suspended in your leg loops, so you can't unclip them. The only thing you can do is undo your chest just before you touch the water, and when you go in, then unclip your legs one by one. But with any water landing, whether ditching your main glider or under reserve, don't panic if you haven't unbuckled. You will get free as long as you focus on one buckle at a time and don't fight in the harness. Because there's air still in your harness, it does actually push you forwards like that. And so you feel a bit trapped, but you're not, don't worry. All you have to do is move the harness to one side and you can easily breathe, no problem. Plus the air slowly fills and then you get to a more upright position. This equilibrium lasts about a minute before the harness gets weighed down and restricts your movement. So this is the best opportunity to unclip and swim away from the harness. But the secret is really just don't panic, because I think all the people I go to when they throw their reserves, quite a lot of the time they're panicking. You know, just calm down. As long as you can breathe, you're okay. So just relax and you'll be fine. But just do everything calmly and gently so the lines don't get tangled up. Some people say just take a bridle knife and you'll be alright. But you've got to be able to use it at the right time. Personally, when you're being dragged underneath the water with a parachute, you won't be able to fish around for a bridle knife and cut it out. So I would say prevention is better than the cure. In other words, if you want to do manoeuvres, avoid windy days and practice over open water with effective rescue backup. So if you're thinking about doing manoeuvres, do them with a decent rescue boat, with them watching you on radio and able to get to you quickly. Thanks, Johan. Isn't he a star? Well, I hope this film has given you a better understanding of piloting and glider control. Because the more you understand and the more confident you are, the more it frees up the positive aspects of flight, like coring properly and flying far. Because knowledge dispels fear, and the more you understand, the more you enjoy this great sport. Villeneuve is a wonderful place to fly, and I just have to say a big thank you to Alain, Randy and Claude for all their help in making the film. But most of all, I'd like to say a big thank you to all the students and pilots, and to all the different manufacturers and designers that help contribute to this massive project. And finally, I'd like to add that no pilot or glider was seriously hurt during the making of this film. If you go to securityinflight.com and register your details, we'll keep you informed of the latest glider handling tips and safety notices from around the world, because together we can make this sport as safe and enjoyable as possible. Sound technician and acro pilot. Merjan, just to let you know, Merjan is now second in the world, second woman acro pilot in the world. She is number 2, live and direct. Here she is, Merjan.
Hello. Up next to first.
Yeah, and second's pretty good. I only got 3rd in the world.
Wow.
So, yeah, I can live with it. Found 2 gay lovers in the trees. They were making love under the tree. Go and give me a real sexy kiss. With no smiling.
I have to think about my wife then.
Okay, yeah. Oh, you got me wet.
Oh! Cheers to me.
Please help support this film and future productions by buying the original DVDs from securityinflight.com.